So contrary to what the clock on the back of the wall says, it is 1:30, so we're going to start. So welcome to Talks, everybody. This is our weekly, or almost weekly, forum on talks on computing systems held at Carnegie Mellon University Silicon Valley campus, Tuesdays at 1:30. I'd like to welcome everybody in the room and everybody on Adobe Connect. This session, as usual, is going to be recorded, and you can find that recording on the Silicon Valley Carnegie Mellon website under News and Events. Today we're going to go till about 2:25, and then we'll take some questions. We're going to push the little microphone deal there to speak, and if you're on the Adobe Connect, please put your questions in the chat box, and I will monitor those and then ask them as we have time for that. And at 2:30 we'll wrap up outside for some refreshments and networking. So we've had probably over 100 talks here, and today we're going to have another excellent speaker, Sanjeev Agrawal, and he's the founder of CollegeFeed. Before CollegeFeed, Sanjeev was the CEO of Aloqa, a mobile push platform acquired by Motorola. He was also the head of product marketing for a small company called Google. He was the VP of products and marketing at Tellme Networks, also, acquired by Microsoft. Sanjeev doesn't look old enough to have done all these things, but he holds a BS and MS in electrical engineering and computer science from what he calls the other Carnegie Mellon, which is MIT. And also today we have his co-founder, Aman Khanna. Aman has the distinction of being one of the first graduates from this campus, 2003, in software engineering. He recently graduated from the GSB at Stanford, and he's been working prior to this with Microsoft. And so we have him today as well. So I'm going to let these gentlemen talk to you about CollegeFeed.
All right, is this better? Now I know you can hear me. Thank you. So Aman and I came prepared to talk about three things today. One is to introduce you to CollegeFeed and what we do. Second, to talk about some of the hard problems we're solving, because we know that this audience is particularly interested in what's new, what's difficult, what's hard. And the third is to leave an open-ended request to you that if you want to help out, if you want to become part of CollegeFeed, if you want to fund the CollegeFeed, by all means, write to sanjeev@collegefeed.com and you can make a personal check out to me. So the idea of CollegeFeed started about 6 months ago when Aman graduated from a second-rate institution compared to his first one, which was the Graduate School of Business at Stanford. And in talking to him, one of the things we realized early on was that the nature of the early career for most students, meaning when you graduate from college, no matter if you're an undergraduate or a graduate student, the going from a structured environment where you study something into the workplace, that transition is one of the hardest transitions people make. And the process by which people make that transition hasn't changed much in a meaningful way for the last 20 years, since when I graduated from the Carnegie Mellon of Boston, as Gladys mentioned. And so we dug into it, talked to about 100 students, including having held several sessions here. I remember being in this room and talking to about 2 dozen students back in January. And we tried probing into this question of, okay, we live in a world where everybody is socially connected. You know, if you think about Facebook and Twitter and all other social channels we're on, there's this one giant global social village, if you will, that's been created. We are constantly communicating with each other. But the way in which I went through my first job, which was at Analog Devices, and then I worked for McKinsey Company, a lot of those sort of happy and unhappy missteps or good steps that took me to where I ended up are not that dissimilar from the experiences a lot of students have today. So we dug into that question, and we ended up with a product that's gone through a couple of iterations. Now it's open to anybody who wants to join from any school. We started with 3. Carnegie Mellon Silicon Valley was one of them. Thank you very much for being such strong supporters of us. Gladys, Michael, and a number of the faculty and staff we've been working with, including Martin. So what I wanted to start out with, before even introducing CollegeFeed, because I know this is what the punchline of this talk is just introduce to you the hard problems we're working on, go back and tell you what we are, and then come back to these hard problems. Fair? Very quickly. So what we're building is a platform that makes it a lot easier for students to brand themselves, to network with employers, connect with employers, and get jobs. And as part of that, there are many, many hard problems that we think can be solved given the technologies that exist. I won't go through this in detail now. I'll come back to this, like I said. But the three sets of problems are around making the right recommendation for students. We call it the Netflix for jobs and companies. Meaning, if I knew some data about you, can I predictively give you a set of options beyond the ones that you might normally consider, and then perhaps help you connect with some of those options. The second is a recommendation engine for employers. So given what I'm looking for, whether I'm eBay or Cisco or Google or Yahoo or Facebook, can I more automatically screen candidates and do a better job at hiring the right ones? And then finally, from a student's perspective again, can I say I'm at point A, and just like on Google Maps, if I want to go to point B from point A, can I figure out different roadmaps to get there, whether I'm walking or I'm taking the train? Or can I find out other people that had started at point A, what are the other point Bs that they ended up at? So those are some of the hard problems, and we'll dive into that once I give you more of a background on CollegeFeed. So what is CollegeFeed? The way we define ourselves is it's an early career marketplace. Going back to what we believe is one of the more inefficient connections that happen when you're about to graduate or even while you're in school, if you think about the constituents of this marketplace, if you think about employers, career services, the student themselves, alumni, we believe there is a way to bring them together in potentially a stronger way on a single platform. And so if you think about what we do, we've built a social platform that has completely changed, we believe, the interaction between students, employers, alumni, and including career services as part of that equation. When we say students, we also include career services there. And the three specific problems we're tackling from a student perspective are, one, how do I brand myself better? What do we mean by that? In your early career, in my early career, people never hired me for all the work experience I had. They hired me for my potential. Potential exhibited typically by some work experience, but mostly samples of work, obviously grades, organizations I belong to, what we call a personal statement. It could be a video or text-based analysis of what somebody aspires to do, what my aspirations in life were, the companies I wanted to work for. So if you think about this notion of a resume or a profile for a student, what they can showcase and exhibit to say, here's my potential, is very different from what I can exhibit today. Because I've worked at a few companies, I've had a few successes, I've had a few failures. So the nature of what we call early career branding can be helped with technology in a big way. And we'll talk about that. So some of the problems are related to, once we create this brand page for a student, what can we sense, right? What information can we feed back to the student to help them improve their branding? And what information can we glean and use those signals to make a better assessment of that student for employers? This making sense so far? The second is networking. You know, everybody says you need to network, you need to network, you need to network to a young 20-year-old or 21-year-old or a 25-year-old. The question is, who the heck are they going to network with, right? So, and everybody gives it their best shot. Obviously, folks at Career Services do a great job keeping in touch with alumni and bringing companies on campus. They reach out to their friends and relatives and try and make connections. But there is a way to do this at scale. So I'll give you a simple example. There is the Plug and Play of Hong Kong. That is a set of 60 companies that no student at Carnegie Mellon would naturally ever hear of. Not because of any other reason, but there is information asymmetry, right? There are these companies out there that would love to connect with students. There are students out here that, if they knew those opportunities existed, might actually be interested in a tour of duty in Asia. And it's just impractical for all those companies to come on campus, or the campus itself to reach out to every company in the world. So is there a more technically interesting, scalable way to introduce all young people to all kinds of opportunities all over the world, right? And we call that networking. And be that these companies coming and doing Google Hangouts on College Feed, be it actual physical events, be it a job board type format, what are the technologies that will help talent and opportunity to come together at an age where people are potentially less aware of their opportunities and what's out there for them? And finally, in terms of making a connection, even that from a scalable perspective, is there a way to provide technically a platform that is the eHarmony, or these are the sorts of opportunities you should consider? And based on the availability of large and small companies, can I recommend to you some small companies and other large companies you may have not thought of? And let me make the connection for you. Make sense so far? So that's simplistically put what College Feed is. A platform that brings together the key constituents that can kickstart early careers. So let me give you an example of what we mean by brand. Okay? So if you go to collegefeed.com today, there is a section called the College Feed Hall of Fame. It's really our way of giving examples to students that join College Feed and saying, look, these kids have done a great job of showcasing their potential. I'll just take this student from UC Santa Cruz, just because A, they've done a great job with their brand page, and B, this is one of our success stories. This is a student that we got connected to YouTube for an interview. And again, there is that information asymmetry. Unclear to me that Google necessarily would have reached out to UC Santa Cruz, or this student in of themselves would have found a way to reach out to YouTube or Google. Could have happened, but certainly it's something that we know we facilitated in this particular case. So if you look at the structure of one of these College Feed brand pages, I'm going to highlight a couple of key differences between a regular resume. I'll go through this quickly first and then come back to me. There are a few sections. Up front, we like students to talk very quickly about the skills they think they have, which hopefully they'll back up through the rest of this page with examples of work, with examples of end product. So this student, for example, says there are these 6 or so or 7 or so hardcore technical capabilities they have, and then they've done product management and design before. Now, initially when we ask students, so let me step back. When a student joins College Feed, we only ask them 3 questions. It takes less than a minute to join. We ask them, tell us some of the companies you're aware of that you'd like to work at, the ones you aspire to work at. In this case, they've said Google, Facebook, Microsoft, not an uncommon set of companies people want to work for. Microsoft maybe, but certainly Google and Facebook. Since this is being recorded, I take that back. I love Microsoft. The second question we ask them is, what are you good at? What do you like doing? It could be anything from blogging to mobile development to web development. And then we ask them, hey, give us a link to your bio. Give us a little bit of signal about what you've done before. We'll upload a resume or a bio. And then we create a world of options for them in their news feed. And I'll show you that news feed in a second. But where this information comes from, the top 3 companies I want to work at, comes from when they sign up. At the beginning, they tell us this. Perhaps one of the most important parts of their brand page are these work samples. So in this case, the student has actually done a lot of stuff on the side, but some of these things they've done are actually for their classes. So it could be samples of classwork. If you're in marketing or finance, you've done competitive analysis. You've done financial analysis, a cash flow analysis that you're okay putting up there. In this case, he's actually gone ahead and said, this is an experimental game, and I will show you my portfolio and link directly from the brand page. Okay? And meanwhile, we're taking signals from all these different linkages that they have provided on their brand page, and we're in the back end giving them sort of a score, which I'll again come back to in terms of that matching algorithm. What makes this student really interesting to particular types of employers? The more detail you provide, the more concrete examples you provide, the higher your score gets for certain types of employers. In this case, he's given us 4 work samples. Again, a feature potentially of people in their early careers, 18 to 25 or 18 to 27, is the classes they consider to be most interesting and high impact for them. So in this case, and what we ask them is, tell us what class you took, why you took it, and if you're okay telling us what grade you got. And it's very, very interesting because on the Silicon Valley campus or on the main campus, I guarantee you, if you're a computer scientist or you're a finance major or you're a history major, everybody knows the 5 hard classes and the 5 clapping for credit classes, right? And so at MIT, for example, there was a class called 6170, Software Engineering Lab. And if you just had the cojones to take that class, no matter what grade you got, that said something about you. So again, in terms of the signals you provide to brand yourself, one of the key signals you can give an employer is, I was courageous enough, or I really wanted to learn, and I took these 3 to 5 classes that were not just core to my major or requirements, but I stretched myself. Even if I got a B or a C, it's interesting. And some of the logic for why I took those classes is also very interesting to us. Work experience, we don't typically expect a lot. This particular student happens to have some, but it can be directly uploaded from your resume or your LinkedIn bio. We do a straight transfer. And then this guy has gone completely overboard because he's one of a few people that have actually put up a video personal statement. And this isn't a moderated or highly manicured personal statement. I'll show it to you. It's a 1.5-minute video. I actually won't go through all of it.
Hi, welcome. My name is Josh Mitchell. I recently graduated from EECS with a degree in computer science and game design.
So anyway, he goes on for about 1.5 minutes about that. But now think about external facing roles. If I want to go into marketing, I want to go into biz dev, I want to go into sales, my ability to show off my personality, my ability to say I'm an extrovert, might be helped a little bit through a video that could express who I am. And then, of course, the education, the degrees, any accomplishments, and references. So what's happening technically in the background is we are coming up with a first cut of a score for this profile, and then matching it to certain jobs and certain possible employer types that might be interesting. Questions, thoughts? Okay. So from going back to what we do, the first aspect of this is branding, really showcase who I am. And please feel free to play with any of the other profiles in the Hall of Fame. There's thousands of them now on CollegeFeed, and we've chosen about a handful, 50 of them to showcase on CollegeFeed. The second is networking, where our first foray into this, we're literally, full disclosure, we launched our first product end of February, an alpha product in 1 school. We launched a beta product in 3 schools in March, and we just opened up globally 10 days ago. So it's still early days for us. So from a networking perspective, the first thing we've done is basically said, let's bring our network to students. So back to my old question of who am I going to network with? Well, one of the advantages we have is we're a small company, but our ability to reach out and bring people that aren't necessarily, CEO of Google, but certainly are people that are intriguing, because if you look at their history, what decisions they made early in their career. Did they go to grad school? What was the first job they did? Then how did they end up at a place everybody wants to work at? What are they doing now, right? So this notion of telling stories of individuals I can relate to and making it available at scale to anybody that does a good job completing their brand page. So one of the reason we consider this exclusive is you don't have to pay anything to attend these. You have to pay some time, meaning you have to make your brand page look good. You have to convince us you're seriously interested in kickstarting your career for you to be invited, right? Because just because you want to be invited, that's the little tax you have to pay. So the goal here is to have many more people. This is an event happening on this week on Friday. This guy also happens to play the guitar, and he plays for a band. Now, it is interesting that is an aspect of what he does that we'll touch on a little bit, because people do want to know. In fact, in September, we have a comedian, actually a pretty famous comedian, Maz Jabrani, who will be speaking. Maz graduated from UC Berkeley, was a commencement speaker there. And what he's going to talk about is, okay, so I'm not great at science and math, but I've got some other talent that is not mainstream. Now, how did I take that talent when I was paying for a UC Berkeley education, convince my parents, and actually start a career that's a little bit offbeat, right? And then, of course, there are other, not just Facebookers and Googlers, and there's a bunch of them, but people from eBay and Cisco and startups that we will bring. This is a way to bring exposure at scale to everybody in the audience. In fact, a good chunk of the audience signed up for this Friday's international. These are people from IIT and BITS Pilani and places that are also represented amongst the CollegeFeed audience now. Make sense? Now, where this can go is this could be a TV channel. every day there is a networking event or a session like this. Perhaps even virtual campus fairs, where not everybody is able to attend, but the student in India that catches a startup's eye, there's a way to scalably do that electronically, we think. Some of our early success stories from a connection perspective. So this is, again, like I said, we launched in late February, and over March and April, we got a whole set of students to apply and get connected to both large and small companies. Now, at a small scale, we could do this almost manually, if you will. Now, we're putting in processes in place to make this scalable. So can I give employers a matching score for somebody's profile and say, I know you want someone that has these 3 hard characteristics and these 3 soft characteristics. Can we, and this is an area which is very interesting to us to try and develop algorithmically with you, hopefully. Hi, Steve, how are you? Thanks for coming. I want to touch a little bit on the employer side of this equation, but before that, let me stop. Any questions on the student side of it and the value proposition and why a student would join CollegeFeed? It's the only reason.
Is it for graduates or just for like juniors or sophomores?
Yeah.
Is it for internships? Or, that's what I'm trying.
Yeah, internships and full-time jobs. So one of the most interesting things we've learned from an employer perspective is that the most forward-thinking employers actually do want to catch kids much earlier than, say, just when they're finishing senior year, right? So, there are people who are making offers out, and everyone here I know lives this, in September of their junior year, sometimes.
I was just making a comment that most of the investment banks like to recruit not freshmen but sophomores and then keep them right through their academic till they graduate and then have them work through.
So on the employer side, there is the exact flip side of the equation and the exact symmetrical problem, if you will, where if you're not Google or Facebook or Apple or a handful of companies, you have an equally hard time getting your attention, right? So if you think students have a hard time branding themselves, employers have an equally hard time branding themselves. Today we published our May edition of the top 40 global employers on CollegeFeed report, which we generate based on the questions we ask students when they sign up. And it's fascinating. The top, maybe I'll go and show you what that chart is. Where else, of course, but it's on Facebook, so I'll show it to you there. What was interesting is we've opened up CollegeFeed just in the last 10 days, like I said, globally, and we've really seen a tremendous uptake in number of users. So this data is potentially more representative than the data we published in April, if I can ever get there. There were 3 or 4 really interesting insights from there that we saw. Oops. One was that for the first time in the 4 months that we've been publishing this, Apple marginally overtook Facebook. I don't know what that means. I don't know if that means, sorry, I know you can't read any of this, but Google, Apple, Facebook, Microsoft, LinkedIn, Amazon, Cisco, eBay, you can see it on our Facebook page. The point is, when someone says they like Facebook, Apple, Google, that's really a starting point in our relationship with them saying, okay, if you're a mobile developer and you like these 3 companies, let me show you the 15 other companies you might want to consider, large and small. So the interesting part of this is not just crowdsourcing this data and getting a sense for who likes what, but then saying, so what? And so let me go back to CollegeFeed. I'm logged in currently as myself, and when I say I like Facebook, Qualcomm, CollegeFeed, Yahoo, and Google, the system comes back and generates a set of recommendations like, oh, by the way, you might want to consider Twitter, eBay, LinkedIn, Microsoft, Apple, Path, and Pinterest, right? So one of the hard problems we want to solve is, what should this list really be? So I gave you all this information on my profile saying I was good at A, B, and C, and I told you what I was majoring in, and I also told you the companies I like. Now, what is a good set of companies that are not just these large ones everyone knows? There are 55,000 companies on Angel List, right? There's probably 10 of them that are really relevant to who I am, right? So again, from a hard problem perspective, it's one that we're just starting to solve, and we have some sense of how we're going to do it. But that would be a great area of collaboration, for example. So coming back to companies, what we provide to companies is a highly branded presence on CollegeFeed. So a lot of what this has to do with is the company showing its DNA off, just like on the brand page of students. We said, what does a company want to see in terms of potential? Well, what does a student want to see? And we've done a lot of work talking to students and saying, you know, let's get away from those university programs pages where if you took the logo out, it said, I'm a 70,000 person global company with good benefits. And let's try and bring out the richness of what the company has to offer. In this case, let's say Cisco. If I'm a woman from UNC that is coming on the CollegeFeed page for Cisco, the copy of what she sees, the types of challenges and contests that Cisco might be running for her because she's a computer scientist, the type of alumni that are at UNC at Cisco that she can potentially schedule time with. I know this is not very clear on the screen, but this actually says schedule time with Stephen, right? So instead of, again, how do you get alumni engaged in college recruiting? It's hard for most companies because of the time and resources involved. Well, just like for the networking events, can we actually allow companies to create brand ambassadors for certain schools and give them a scalable way of running office hours, right? It's just an hour a week or an hour a month. And between them, be able to answer questions, to be able to give the inside story because the alumni-student connection is so strong, right? There's a lot more. In fact, I'll show you a demo of this page that we're building out, where what students want to hear about is, are there people like me at this company? Let's go to Cisco. So the use case here is there's this woman coming in and saying, I'm interested in Cisco, and Cisco presenting to her a personalized yet scalable way of communication, i.e., here's why you should be interested in us. Here are alumni that you can talk to. What does your career at Cisco look like? Right? In this case, it's some senior people, women, minorities, chambers talking about lean in. Yes, that's interesting. But what's far more interesting is two relatively young women that have recently joined Cisco, either from my school or a similar school, and what their experiences and career paths are. Far more compelling than potentially some of the communication that happens. And of course, this would change totally if this was a man, a marketing major, because they might be interested in different things. The jobs that the company shows can be tailored to who's seeing it, obviously campus events, any featured opportunities, social conversation that's happening across the web where Cisco interns are talking about the good time they're having, innovation. So these are patents and papers, engineers you will get to work with, which again is the sort of thing that draws people at this stage in their careers. Who do I get to work with? Who will be my mentors? What problems will I work on? Make sense? So from a company perspective, if I don't have the natural benefit of a top-of-mind brand for students, how do I wedge myself in by positioning myself in a way to each individual that is far more meaningful? Provide a way which extends reach. There's lots of small employers and even large employers that don't recruit internationally, right? And if you just take countries like India and China as a source of talent, Chile, Brazil, many other places are included, well, let's try and level the playing field for those employers to be able to reach into those talent pools, right? And we're starting off with a few schools in India, and that's really certainly a great test case for us. And it's not just the US-India connection, it's also the India-Singapore connection. From a scalability perspective, that's really interesting. The social sir?
Sanjeev, I just had one question when you talked about companies, because one of the things that we find, and Michael Lind does a fantastic job here, is bigger companies that have a formal program, they have university relations people, they have folks reaching it. But we find like an awful lot of companies in the ecosystem in the Valley, is smaller companies, they kind of like send like 4 or 5 of their key people to schools to try and figure out, because they're in such competition for interns and they're trying to hire software engineers right now. Do you have a program for smaller startup companies
Yeah.
as well as the bigger companies? Or are you finding you're targeting that as a longer kind of tail thing, if you will?
No, I think it's easier to work with them for obvious reasons. They move faster, and their problems are far more precise. Yes, they care about branding, but the one thing they care about is give me good people. So if you think about even the term college feed is actually two feeds. There's a student feed, which shows here the jobs and companies I should be interested in. There's a corresponding employer feed, which basically is composed of students. So large company or small, we will push to you the types of people you're interested in. That's an awesome question, where they're not really interested or don't have these assets to even build stuff like this. Great point. So yes, we do. We absolutely do. In fact, we've signed up many more small employers than large ones, just once because the pain point is obvious and they just want their problem solved. So to give you a sense of where we're headed, we would like to create the most personalized, dynamic, engaging newsfeed. We keep calling it a useful Facebook for students. So I log in and I am presented with personally curated opportunities, technically curated, not by hand obviously, that take the information I've given College Feed, and if Netflix can generate recommendations for, if you saw this movie, you'll like these, you know, there's a lot we can do by way of automatically generating recommendations for students that say, if you like these large companies and you like these big areas of work, mobile, web development, or even in marketing or finance or PR, there are these tech startups, non-tech startups that you might be interested in, right? There are alumni that you might want to reach out to, right? And these alumni can participate, if they belong to small companies, in these virtual hangouts or present their companies a lot better. Companies doing marketing to students who are appropriate. So if I'm a networking engineer or I'm somebody that has done work at Juniper, well, maybe Cisco or smaller networking startups should be reaching out to me. And so if you think about the three big pieces that we're building, one is what content makes sense for a student, depending on their major and domain. What are the tools that we can provide, even more dynamic profiles? As soon as I do a piece of work that I want to show off, can I take a picture of it and push it onto my brand page? And that gives College Feed one more signal into what I'm good at. And that allows us to then take that profile and push it to the right employer, or push the next best opportunity on this news feed. And this isn't, you know, it's fairly simple to think about. I think getting the algorithm right and getting the signals right is the fun, interesting part that we're trying to solve. There are certain things that can be crowdsourced. Like, for example, even across 3 schools, if we knew where everybody had interviewed this spring, right? And someone said, hey, I interviewed for this one role, our ability to then recommend to them, hey, people who interviewed for this role interviewed at these 3 other roles, which is hard for one school to do. But if you have critical mass across schools, it's something that's very interesting to students. Certainly management tools for career services, as you saw in the profile, there was this idea of introduce this student to someone. Being able to keep track of, by student, by employer, how many introductions have I made and where have they gone? And so building a career services portal to make lives easier. Career conversations, both with the industry insiders through the hangouts that we mentioned, certainly with alums. So one of the problems we're thinking through is, what's the right set of motivations? And we wanted to do a practicum around this that would make alumni more engaged in coming back and maybe pushing jobs or projects or just talking about their companies, right? If they're not large, well-known companies, that would address some of the pain points they may be having. I can tell you as an MIT alum myself, it's hard often to know where to go if we're a 12-person company. So for us to go on campus and try and do a campus event is not that easy. And it's not that easy for us to find out the right place to even make a post that we'll know hundreds of students at MIT, for example, might see. So imagine having a CMU-SV.collegefeed.com page where an alum could decide, I only want this to be seen, this post to be seen by my school, or I don't care. I'm okay, just like I do on Facebook, push this to my wall, push this on my friend's wall, push this in groups. Questions before I move on to a little deeper discussion on some of the problems? Okay, so coming back to where we started, and it's worth spending a couple of minutes on a few of these areas. This idea of making good recommendations for students. If we could do that, that would meet, frankly, a lot of our mission, which is, number one, if I told you all this information, it's on my profile, I completed this great brand page, now what? So the service we'd like to provide students is to go cull all this wonderful information out there, right? Be it on job boards, be it on other places that have content for students, and provide that precise feed that says, you should be looking at these 3 large companies and these 3 small ones. Don't restrict yourself to the brands you've heard of. Let's expose you and educate you to who might be hiring for people like you, right? So if you're thinking about, big data, don't just focus on Google, Amazon, and Facebook and Pinterest and 4 other companies. Here are people that are solving really hard problems. So giving brand pages and employers a score by domain and by interest area is a hard problem. Okay. The second is potentially easier with scale, which is if we can get crowdsourced information on where I should interview based on where others have interviewed. Which alums and industry insiders can help me? So you noticed from a large employer perspective, we're giving them the opportunity to have ambassadors that can scale by school. But in general, if we can find a hook to engage alumni to talk back, to come back and it's not a one-sided equation, it gives my brand a little bit of exposure to my school, etc. I can hire without having to necessarily go on campus through virtual career fairs and the like. And then this content. What is the most appropriate content by major, by domain that should be part of a student's newsfeed? So from a recommendation engine perspective, those are 4 or 5 of the major problems we're trying to solve. Correspondingly, from a matching perspective, if I take a profile like the one you saw for Josh, how do we score that? Right? So each section, we have some ideas and we've started to score them, but then how do we weight a particular work sample versus another, right? How do we get the notion of quality embedded into that without having to necessarily hand curate everything? And then based on the criteria for various job types, if we can have a mapping of, okay, these are 1 million students in college feed, here are 1 million jobs, it's a great match.
And this leads to a kind of natural fourth kind of hard problem here, is that, oftentimes in the current kind of climate, when startups are thinking about getting going, the people that are doing it may not have put a company together before. And so you may be able to observe patterns in early stage placement and in some senses have, all our students want to go do startups right now, and I'm sure the same is true in MIT and Berkeley and everywhere like that. So you could almost crowdsource around campuses and say, hey, look, there's a startup thinking about doing this. What level of interest might there be? And sort of get it, because that's a real problem. Because normally some VC companies have got headhunters, but very few outside of the big ones, and that's a real problem, especially in the current climate.
And related to that is also, how do I find co-founders or other people that may be across the country but are really complementary in their skill sets? One of the most requested features we've had from students in College Feed is, I see these kids in the Hall of Fame, can I please connect with them? One of them seems to have done great blogging before, so it's all coming, but absolutely, to your point, getting groups of students to engage with each other, either because they have common interests, or they want to do a startup together, or they find someone who could be a great mentor because they've done it, right? Absolutely, those are bang on point. This notion of career road mapping, this is again a very hard problem potentially to do algorithmically because of the need for the data, but maybe we can do it starting out a little bit anecdotally, right? Can we look at by school the types of majors and graduation rates and where those people have ended up to make recommendations like, 30% of those who graduated with this major from your school are doing this. And if you want to go from here to there, there's no one way. Certainly going to graduate school helps, but then you might want to go take a product manager role at a startup if you want to go and be whatever the role it is that you're trying to get to. So we've broken it down into 3 pieces, which again is the map analogy is great. Based on where I'm starting, what directions can I go? Where are other people that started here a few years ago? And then how do I go from point A to point B? Is there 1 or 3 routes?
in some sense, what you're trying to do is sort of build a mentoring kind of platform.
Yeah, it's amazing. We've heard that before. You know, one of our friends is someone who's recruited in the Valley for about 15 years, and she uses this term that I never use. I never even knew it, but she introduced it to me. It's in loco parentis. So I don't have my parents with me at school, right? Can I technically give you some help that takes the form of, an advisor or a coach along the way, but also scalably pushes stuff to you, in a way that's very hard, and it takes advantage of having multiple schools, having seen lots of success stories across different schools to have that richness of data. So you're absolutely right that parts of this is mentoring in the sky. And some of these are more easily solved. Some of these will take a long, long time to refine. But these are all, we believe, important things to get started on, even if you have to hand curate some of this and then build algorithms around. Sorry.
I just had another kind of deviation from the script here, but a lot of big companies have university relations people, not just for recruiting, but also for engaging in collaborative research. And it's very difficult for most companies to be able to locate in different universities who are that group that they should be reaching out to.
Right.
And maybe not for a job or in a big research, but just in the sense of building that bench strength if they decide to go ahead with a given project.
Right.
And that may be another kind of area that you could extend into that right now is currently not covered by anybody. I mean,
that one, because we just went through that Josh's profile, to the extent that that triggers a signal saying this would be an ideal candidate for some project that a large company is doing, you're absolutely right. Finding jobs in universities, as well as finding the right groups that are working on some problems, is very hard.
More of companies. I was talking to a large telecoms chip provider this morning, and their university relations folks, and they're working on a big new initiative, and they want to create a kind of brand that attracts kind of PhD students. A pool that they can draw from to scale quickly as they kind of they roll it out.
Got it. Absolutely. So, yeah. Any other feedback, suggestions, thoughts, checks?
How are you going to make money out of it?
Right. So two things. One is for the brand page that you saw. The branded personalized presence is interesting to a lot of large employers, and both to large and small employers, the notion of hiring, and there are numbers like, so NACE, the National Association of College Employers, says that the average cost of recruiting students from college is like $10,000 per student, and I think that's just the average. Now, if you think about students on this campus, it's probably 3 or 4 times that for the average high-end engineer. So if you now consider making that process more efficient, potentially more direct, that is certainly one way, and we've seen some data points around some of the students we've connected and the employers' willingness to pay, large and small employers. So this isn't just limited to Fortune 500 companies. This is startups would pay, right? So in fact, that may be the more scalable part of the business than the branding part. The branding part is limited to just some large employers that can afford it and care.
I don't know how much money LinkedIn makes out of their job listings, but they charge a whole bunch of money for their job listings.
Right.
And so I was just wondering, we found that most of their job listing site, are really terrible for people coming out of school.
That's right.
And first of all, you don't get any kind of response for that. They're great for 10 years, VP of biz dev, You know, you get a great, great bunch of pay. But you're paying 400,
Yeah.
what, 200, 295, $300 per job listing on these sites.
And we found in talking to folks that, and then the reason is that 20% of a starting salary compared to 20% of a VP salary, very different. And so what's in it for a recruiter to want to go into the business of placing younger people early in their careers? That motivation is missing, right? Second, if my profile gets lost, if a 25-year-old's profile gets lost with mine, that's just unfair, right? That's just not going to be apples and apples. So we think there is a wedge, a real place where if you know that whoever's participating in this network is by definition early career, you're not going to find people who are 10 years out of school and over. So if you are interested in hiring people in that stage, it's a far more focused age group to go after. So we believe, the hit rate and the efficiency will be higher just because of a focus. Now for LinkedIn, they're doing a great job. The recruiting market is $100 billion big. This may be $10 billion, right? So where you want to focus and how much effort you want to put into it, I'm sure that there's a lot going on there, and I have a lot of respect for the people there. I know a bunch of them. For us, we think that the tools required and the, just like the brand pages we talked about, or the networking solutions, or even the connections and profile scoring, it's just a little bit different. Not that it can't be done, but it's just a different math that needs to be done.
Just to add to that, I think one way in which we are different from LinkedIn's model is that we don't charge for the listing. We do a pay for performance. So the company actually pays us only after a job offer has been made and accepted by the student. So I guess the average revenue per user is much higher in this case. And it's a more personalized, more high-touch business than a mechanical job listing. So
we found from experience that you make a LinkedIn job listing, and for anybody with very little job experience, basically you're looking for 1 or 2 years, or maybe even this, you absolutely get useless CVs. I mean, and they're absolutely. We wonder why we paid $300 for this stuff. But for anything else, I mean, it's fantastic.
Absolutely,
I mean, you can't beat that.
Absolutely. And that's the reason why we think there's a lot of work to be done by them and by us and by everybody trying to play in this space. We're certainly not alone. There's tons of people trying to attack this elephant from different sides. And getting that right, the branding, the matching, the connecting right. There's a lot of people trying to do that.
I think elephant's a great word to describe it, because a lot of startups, they see this whole space and they want to boil the entire ocean with 12 people. It's kind of tough to do. And with your backgrounds and where you are, do you have a kind of a rollout strategy where you pick, say, software engineers and develop an expertise in that field and then roll it out across different verticals, or are you just going to launch it per se?
Just by virtue of who we are and where we focused, we found that more than half our population is software engineers. They're also the most marketable. There's another niche we found that's interesting, which is people with show-offable skills in other domains, design, writing, right? Because so much of our emphasis is on you are what you've done, as opposed to you are who you say you are. Where people can demonstrate blogs, design. Clearly, GitHub is a great source for our students to demonstrate what they've done. It becomes easier to create these portfolios or work samples and then to match. So some of it, we deliberately kept it broad at the beginning to see who we'd catch. And we're finding that it's, to your point, software engineers, even hardware engineers in general, right? Plus design and writing are a big chunk. Other thoughts, questions?
Yeah, just a question about your in terms of, you kind of get information from both. I went through this little exercise just to figure out what you guys do. So you get information from Facebook and LinkedIn, etc.
Yeah.
What stops LinkedIn from cutting you off? Because you're pulling information from them.
Oh, we're not pulling information directly from them. It's something that the student is OAuthing, right? So if, sure, LinkedIn or Facebook can stop the OAuth and say nobody can take their information and export it, but for a student, the information on LinkedIn belongs to them, just like their information here belongs to them as well. So it's not as if we're reaching into the LinkedIn API ourselves and necessarily are drawing a bunch. So they could decide as a general policy that, but it's in their best interest to keep exporting their data because their brand goes out with it. I don't know if I'm answering your question, though.
You know, because to some extent, you know, you're trying to make life easy for the student. And
Yep.
the thing is that the people that you have who are coming in really don't have a real history.
Correct.
So, you know, so I'm just trying to figure out, you know.
No, so to that point, I'll give you some stats. So more than 50% of our students now sign up through Facebook, but less than 10% of them actually link to their LinkedIn profile. Because A, they may not have one. B, they may not have one with a ton on it because there isn't a lot of work. But these are, again, I don't know what this will look like a year from now, but certainly at this point, we're finding those are very telling. And then the students that sign up through Facebook, we're pulling just very discrete pieces of the About Me portion of their profile. And even that is fairly sparse. So people are actually taking the brand page, and a lot of them, like Josh, didn't really take advantage of a lot of his pre-filled LinkedIn data. He filled out those 5 classes, and he filled out some of this because he felt, oh, this showcases me so much better. I'm going to start using this as my signature, if you will.
I mean, I'm sure.
Sir.
Why do you need all the person's LinkedIn contacts for the import?
We don't. We don't ask for that.
It currently is asking for it.
No, what it's asking for is if you have a LinkedIn bio and you want to save yourself some time in completing our profile, some of the sections map. So if you've completed your work experience, we're not asking you for your LinkedIn contacts. We're asking you for your LinkedIn bio.
I guess LinkedIn is confused.
Did you have that experience that it was asking you for your contacts on LinkedIn? Oh,
It's asking you to, can we broadcast to your contacts?
oh, okay. That's purely what every app does, where it gets user permission to say, and you can say no, you can uncheck it.
I think it's on the Facebook Connect. And right now, we do not actually broadcast to any of the LinkedIn contacts. For sure.
We don't even ask for permission.
I was just explaining why I tried CollegeFeed. I didn't LinkedIn because I don't know why I would be giving you all my LinkedIn contacts.
But you're not.
Well, that's what LinkedIn thinks you're doing.
LinkedIn's trying to get you to do that as much as CollegeFeed is trying to get you to do that. I think it's probably, because going back to Ravi's point, I think LinkedIn would probably give you all that log data, to be honest with you, because it would be so helpful for them in driving traffic in the way that they want to,
right?
Because that's the third pillar of their business model right now,
right?
But to Ravi's point, also, I think that if you can crack this nut, then your exit strategy, if you want an early one, is nicely laid out.
Yeah, I'll just leave it at that. But look, if you think about this elephant metaphor again, there's many people that are interested in this space, as you can imagine. Anyone that has a strong campus presence. Chegg is another player. Facebook is obviously one, to the extent Facebook cares about the space. I don't know if they do or don't. I hear it conflicting. LinkedIn certainly is doing a great job. There are other solutions that are popping up in the campus events space, right? There are solutions popping up all over the place because there's so many different problems you can start with and try and tackle. Sir.
Actually, Todd, the reason why it asks for the LinkedIn to access your contacts is because we've got a feature over there which tells you which of your LinkedIn contacts you should be talking to if you're interested in working in particular companies. So if you go to the student dashboard and you say you're interested in working with Facebook, it actually goes and checks which of your contacts on the LinkedIn profile, they might be somehow connected to Facebook, and they might be alums from your school, and it gives you suggestions of how to network with them.
It just might help explain the 10%, because I was very reticent to say yes.
Okay,
But
should
obviously you get more features.
got it.
I think that's a demographic issue, Todd. I think when you look at the, I mean, certainly when I look at our son as a freshman, there's not a problem.
Yeah,
sharing
whatever.
Information.
Yeah.
Kind of legacy thing.
Sanjeev?
Yes.
It also seems like this model might be useful for people who are changing jobs, changing industries. Do you have any interest from users yet?
We do. So, so the problems people face transitioning from school to their first jobs don't necessarily go away in their first jobs. So we hear a lot from people in their first job saying, I'm not sure or what else was out there, sort of, not buyer's remorse so much as, no matter what first job you did, it's the first time you're doing it, so you're probably not going to be that, or there are parts of it that are that you'd like to change. And so absolutely that first to second job transition as well, we hear a lot about. That now, what am I capable of? What are my career paths? Where else could I go given what I'm doing? Just need to bite off what we can chew at the beginning, but there's a big space there as well.
Because I know it's difficult to like if I'm transitioning into marketing, coming out of finance, or I'm going from high tech and I want to go to something different. It's like starting all over again. Very scary.
Right. Yeah, transitions are exactly, this is one big transition people make, but you're right, there are many, many transitions you could be making throughout that we could try and address. So we have 5 minutes, and there's food outside, I know. 3 minutes, sorry, sir.
So how do we sell this to students when there's so many other applications out there already? How do we say, do this one too? Here's another one you have to log on to and keep track of.
Right. So I think part of this is self-selection, frankly. A lot of CMU students have signed up already. Some of them we've helped connect to companies. Some of them are showing up this Friday for this event. I think the value proposition is a little bit different, we think, from many other companies. It's not a job board. It's not a place where your profile gets lost. I think if you had to mention 3 things, one would definitely be look at the quality of your brand. You really care about your brand. And it's something you need to start building early on in life, and CollegeFeed helps you do that. Secondly, we're not 20 years old. We are slightly older, much older. And one of the benefits of that is our ability to draw people to open up our network and bring it on behalf of students, both from a networking and a connection perspective that you'll see more and more of. So to the extent, so I go back to Brand Network Connect, where the most tangible thing students can see right now is certainly the branding piece. But more and more you'll see the networking and the connection piece come out.
I think one of the very strong points as proof of CollegeFeed is the actual connections we've made for CMU students so far in terms of connecting them with employers and getting them interviews. So those proof points are pretty compelling for students, and we're happy to share some of those with you.
The other point I made, one thing that's going back to this mentoring business, right? One of the reasons CMU Silicon Valley is here, there are 6,000 alumni out there.
That's right.
Right? So the question then becomes, how do you use it? So can we use something like this to set up this platform for people to actually say, oh, I'll talk to only CMU-SV people or CMU Pittsburgh people or something like that, without having to, they have limited time available, right? So,
No, so going back to, this doesn't do a great job of it because it doesn't have an alumni portion to the feed, but absolutely, if there is a commitment on, let's say CMU Silicon Valley, and we worked with the 6,000 alumni, we don't need 6,000 of them. We need 60 of them to want to reach out and participate. And if they're having the same experience I'm having with MIT, then they probably are looking to not have to do unnatural things to do it, but if they could email, right? So if this were as simple as an alumni emailing CMU-SV at collegefeed.com with a little Twitter-like post.